everybody. It's Ed Martin, president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. Great to be with you again. 1 week from today, on April 15th, Hulu will release the FX series. So FX has done a series, as you know. It'll be released on Hulu, and it's called Mrs. America. And it looks like the Mrs. America folks have put out another trailer as they have sought reviews from folks. In fact, they've sent advance copies of the series to all sorts of different Hollywood Reporter and Variety.com and all sorts of sources to get reviews. Of course, they didn't give one to us, the Phyllis Schlafly organization, and nor did they give one to the Schlafly family. I guess that's not a surprise because, as we'll see when we break down this trailer, they're still not telling the truth, which is why I ask you, go to realmrsamerica.com, realmrsamerica.com, and you can see these trailers, you'll see the breakdown. But today we're going to break down the second trailer, came out just yesterday from the Mrs. America folks. This opens up the scene, it says, based on true events. And the Hollywood Reporter says, Mrs. America might be the rare historical drama more illuminating than a documentary on the subject. More illuminating than a documentary? I think what they mean is illumination is their version of indoctrination. You can already tell when they say based on true events, they're not trying to do history. They're not even trying to do a documentary. They're trying to spin the truth. And that's why we've got to keep looking at realmissamerica.com and break these things down. You know, the Baltimore Sun has said in their review of this, the genius of Cate Blanchett's performance is the way she shows Schlafly as both an oppressor and victim, feeling the chains of patriarchy, keeping her in a submissive role to her husband. This is really silly. Here's a real picture of Phyllis on the screen right now and her husband, Fred. They were an extraordinary partnership, both very successful, bright people. You know, Phyllis often said she had it all, just not all at once. And what she meant by that was she had a loving set of parents and a sister. She was raised in pretty close to poverty in the Depression, a working class family, or at least an upbringing that was always kind of working through the Depression. But she had it all. She had a great husband, 6 children, grandchildren. She wrote books, gave speeches. She was involved in politics. She had it all. She just didn't always have it at once. And the feminists didn't understand that. And one thing they didn't understand was the partnership with her husband, Fred. He was a very successful lawyer himself, very prominent in the American Bar Association. And when they married, they became a dynamic duo all through the rest of their life. They depict in the series that Fred Schlafly testified as if his wife couldn't testify. I think it's probably true that Fred Schlafly testified hundreds of times in his role as a leader in the ABA. And I think we know that he did testify once for Phyllis early on when it looked like talk about patriarchy, the legislature was requiring only lawyers to testify. Phyllis later went to law school in her early 50s and graduated in the top of her class, so go figure. But that wasn't really real, and their relationship was wonderful. So they're spinning that, and it's terrible stuff, but it's not true also. Also, you'll see there's a depiction of Phyllis sort of yelling or talking back to her husband Fred about, I raised your 6 children. If you knew Phyllis Schlafly, and thousands of Americans have come forward, and a number of the prominent ones have signed a letter at realmrsamerica.com that shows they knew her. Phyllis loved her children. She loved raising her kids. She was once quoted as saying, most women would rather cuddle a baby than a typewriter. And she always said it with a big smile. I remember in my time working for her, seeing her with her grandkids. And a friend of ours used to say that nothing would stop Phyllis Schlafly quicker than one of her babies. This friend of ours had 6 children. It's just silly. Now, here's what's true. The relationship between these two wonderful husband and wife and family, they certainly had different ideas. And I think, as someone said, Phyllis would sometimes defer to her husband on speaking engagements as he would with her. And more importantly, they were a family unit. And you see the fruits based on the life they led in the community within which they lived. It's not depicted in Mrs. America. The Hollywood Reporter, in reviewing this, says, Phyllis allied with proud racists and murderous homophobes. It's just a lie. It's a slur. Phyllis Schlafly loved every human being. In fact, often she would admonish those of us that worked with her to never speak ill of another person, whether it was Pelosi or Boehner. It didn't matter. Each person was in the image and likeness of God. She did not ally herself with racists or homophobes. She never did. In fact, her faith called her forward in a way. What she was trying to do was give more opportunity for more people to feel the love that's at the center of the family and the center of marriage and at the heart of America. It's really silly. By the way, there's a president, the former president of NOW, the National Organization of Women, and often a debate opponent of Phyllis's. Her name was Karen DeCrow. And Karen DeCrow was interviewed in 2005, and she said this: Phyllis is smart. So it was fun to be on a program with her. I never found Phyllis to be unpleasant, unfriendly, or uncooperative. That's the truth of Phyllis Schlafly. Don't listen to Miss America. Listen to what her friends, Phyllis's friends, and family say about her. Vanity Fair reviewed the Mrs. America, and they said, quote, Mrs. America invents a friend for Phyllis in Alice McRae, depicted in the show as the housewife who first turns Phyllis onto the ERA. But you get the feeling that Alice exists merely to confirm that, yes, Phyllis is awful. What does that even mean? I mean, Vanity Fair is reading the mind of a fictitious character and reading this. So we have the script makes up a character, and then all these different people like Vanity Fair, and I'm sure the other characters, decide to read the mind of this made-up person and make them out to be poor and unkind. It's silly. It's really silly and comical. Of course, it's because it's Hollywood. The truth of ERA is Phyllis Schlafly was a very prominent and well-respected national figure, speaking about the threat of Soviet communism and particularly about the need for America to stand up for itself with military superiority. She'd given speeches all over the country, and in the early 1970s, she was invited to review the documents around ERA, and she assessed that it was a threat, and she shifted her focus to fight on ERA. No one encouraged her. It's really silly. There's this image in the trailer, and I think in the series, where they make it look like Phyllis envies the feminists. There's one thing you knew about Phyllis Schlafly. She worked hard her whole life, and she built a lot of great things for herself and for her family. She had a wonderful husband and life and all. She didn't envy anybody else. She was far too well-adjusted. And, the real woman, by the way, who introduced Phyllis, the name of her name was Shirley Spellenberg, who was a friend and ally of Phyllis's for many years. That's who introduced Phyllis to the ERA. This Alice lady is fake characters, fake news, fake Hollywood, as President says, fakers right there. The Hollywood Reporter reviewed this and said, unless you're a Schlaflyite, it's impossible not to get infuriated by the conservatives' baseless scaremongering. Huh? I mean, you look at it, the feminists were the ones who were out of the mainstream when they marched around the Houston Convention in the late 70s, and they spouted off that they wanted abortion without apology, and they said housewives are unpaid slaves. Think of the millions of American women who looked up and said, I'm not a slave. I love my family. I love what I'm doing. It was crazy. Miss America, Betty Friedan there, actually uses a real Friedan quote. This was a very unpleasant, talk about unpleasant. This was an unpleasant person, Betty Friedan. And the quote of Friedan is actually used. She said, the home is a, quote, comfortable concentration camp. Now think about if a conservative used a reference to concentration camps and the Holocaust to refer to the left's ideology or the feminazis' work that they do. Here's Betty Friedan. They use it in the series. It's a good indication. At the heart of Mrs. America and the feminist agenda is not love, it's not kindness, it's not education, it's frankly hate. Now here's an image that you'll see. This is insane. They have Phyllis Schlafly on stage at a campaign fundraiser in a bikini. It never happened. I mean, we know this. We've checked this out. It never happened. It's just a lie. It's a way for Kate Blanchett, who is a Hollywood starlet, to flaunt her own body and to make this miniseries seem titillating to someone. But it's not true. It's not history. It's Hollywood. And it's Hollywood that objectifies a woman. Think about it. It's Hollywood that demeans women by putting them in bikinis when it's not factually true. You know, we need to liberate ourselves from these Hollywood pigs that exploit women. Look, a week from today, on April 15th, Mrs. America is going to debut. They spent $50 million, probably more, to slur and to demean one of the great Americans of the last 100 years. When you watch it, if you have to, and I don't encourage you to, just come back to realmrsamerica.com, we'll break it down. But you look and find out the life and legacy of Phyllis Schlafly. We're proud that they noticed Phyllis Schlafly. We're proud that they're threatened by her life and her teaching. But more than anything, we're proud to work for her in her vision and what she cared about. A lot of people in this country are celebrating a special holiday and headed towards Easter. I hope you have a blessed holiday and blessed Easter, and I hope that you'll come to realmissamerica.com to find out more about the real Phyllis Schlafly. Thanks, we'll talk again soon.